Holding your microphone.
We are waiting for our chair to join us and we'll soon commence the session. Good evening, Professor Mohanty.
Very good evening. Good
Good
evening.
evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Um, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you, sir, Professor B.B. Mohante, as the chair of this session, which is entitled as Tribal Beliefs and Practices. Professor Bhushan Mohanty is currently the Dean, School of Social Sciences and International Studies, Professor and Head Department of Sociology, Pondicherry University. Professor Mohanty has numerous publications to his credit and has more than 41 research articles. He is also the managing editor of Sociological Bulletin. Professor Mohanty has contributed immensely and actively to academic reforms by being part of some very important committees at UGC, ICSSR, UPSC, IITs, and IIMs. Universities and research institutions have also benefited immensely under his stalwartship. I welcome you, sir, and I welcome all the paper presenters and participants of this session. Looking forward to your presentations and very warm welcome to each one of the members of the audience. Sir, with your permission, can we begin the session?
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, we'll begin. Thank you, Dr. Bharadwaj, for your kind introduction. And I say I am really thankful to the organizers and particularly Dr. Bharadwaj and others for giving me an opportunity to chair this important session. I also welcome all the paper presenters to this session. I think we have 5 papers to be presented in this session.
Yes, sir.
And we have 1.5 hours time. And I am sorry for being late by 5 minutes. I am ready to extend it for another 5 more minutes if it is required.
That's very considerate of you, sir. May I call the first paper presenter?
So we can give each paper presenter 10 minutes time for to present, and we
Yes.
can have discussion for another 5 minutes.
Yes. Would you want it that way, or would you want the discussion after everybody has presented
Yeah,
the
I think
papers?
in the end also we can have a discussion. That will be
Yes.
better actually. We
That would
can,
help us manage the
yes,
time better.
right.
So may I invite Mr. Roshan Zalko, and I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. You may please introduce yourself. Roshan Praveen from Jesus and Mary College, Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, Professor Mohanty. I'm Roshan Praveen Khalko. It is pronounced as Khalko. We do write with X.
Like Professor Kaka.
Yes, exactly. I also belong to the same tribe that he belongs, Urao tribe. Let me present my paper. I'll share my PPT with you all. All right. The topic of my paper is basically moral philosophy among the tribes of Chota Nagpur. Before I begin, I just want to put this paper into a context. In this paper, I would be discussing about the moral philosophy, where I will try to draw out some of the features that are practiced among the tribes of Chota Nagpur. Chota Nagpur is basically a kind of geographical terrain which we'll consider as if they are the eastern part of Gondwana Plateau. The second thing that I have in mind is also to bring out some kind of moral theory, if possible, which captures the essence of tribal ethics. And lastly, in this paper, I will be also critical about some of the assumed flaws, thereby to provide strengthened tribal moral philosophy. To begin, I must again place myself into a context where I want to say that Adivasis are not Hindus, neither they are Christians nor Buddhists. They have separate, completely separate identity. And of course, believing on what Warrior Elvin has said, I would also repeat the same thing, that Aboriginals are the real Swadeshi products of India, in whose presence everyone is foreign. They are the ancient people with moral claims and rights thousands of years old. They were here first, and they should come first in our regard. And concerning the moral philosophy, of course, I am reminded also of William Wordsworth, who says that one impulse from the vernal wood may teach you more of a man, of moral evil and of good than all the sages can. Ethics is basically a theoretical study of moral problems. And tribal philosophy, tribal ethics has not been really the part of our discussion so far. So it has not been the theoretical study till recent times. These few years, we have seen some of the issues that are being raised. So tribal ethics has been basically considered as if they are the customary and hence at the level of some subconsciousness. Although I admit the fact that tribal morality is categorically customary, still it requires larger academic engagements. On the contrary, the reflective morality, which the modernity comes along with, reflective morality, while making room for progressiveness and subjective morality, has opened up a possibility of a situation where a person may lack meaning in their very existence and may feel lost. Moreover, with industrialization and globalization, economic values have taken upper hand over ethical values. And sometimes I do ascribe to the subjective morality of the modernity. Every established religion, on the other side, which is in contrast to tribal religion, treat this world as a medium to attain the final goal, thus again reducing the moral responsibility of an individual towards our physical world. So in order to provide a kind of alternative morality, I see tribal philosophy as an alternative morality. Perhaps this will tie the humans to the rightness and wrongness of society and not to some abstract truth or beings. I begin by critiquing S.C. Roy, who had called morality of Urao as subconscious. In my opinion, or in my opposition to S.C. Roy, I consider the awareness of value about rightness and wrongness as original. Agreeing to Padmaja Sen, I believe that the consciousness of value is sui generis. It consists in practical attitude of some agent assumed towards an object or an intentional act in relation to his feelings, desires, interests, and purposes and needs. And therefore, tribal morality and their ethical codes are not at the level of subconsciousness, strictly private and applicable only to the members of the tribe. On the other hand, I believe that these ethical values adopted by the Adivasis do have properties of world consciousness, but without adopting the idea of essentialism in rightness or wrongness. There are many features, but I would like to highlight only few. First of them is one of the main important features of tribal morality is nature has been considered as a moral agent. Adivasi worldview considers humans as an extension of nature. And even though agency is not defined by the responsibility and judgments, nature is a moral agent. To be very specific for the Urao tribe, everything in nature and art is instinct with a life or with a potentiality of life and energy. And in that sense, the whole nature is morally conscious. It is believed that Mother Nature precisely knows the rightness and wrongness of any human action and can decidedly set a course that cannot be changed. And yet, there is a coexistence with nature, not as owners, but as stewards or custodians. No wonder many tribal thinkers assert that a tree in the hamlet ceases to be merely a tree, but as an important member of the village community. So also the birds and animals. Second feature that is I see as a very important feature is community as individuals. By definition, Adivasis are communitarians, and thus their sense of moral values emerge from the community and regulated by the ancestral advice, not literally but metaphorically. It is important to note here that moral values get sanctioned not by religion but by the community and seldom by customs. Why I say this, I'll come to this slightly later. Decision of community overrides the customs. However, community makes every effort to imbibe or stick to the customary values. This very process makes ethical values of Adivasis progressive in nature.
Mr. Khalko, you have 3 minutes left.
All right. Thank you. The third feature, I'm just moving on. I'm pointing out the third feature. Humanistic value, without religious codes ever written to dictate the conscience of Adivasis, their practice of moral values center on nature-human spirit continuum. This means their world is a world of immanent humanity, where primordial assumes a human form, where everything is human and human becomes the holy other. Of course, I have taken this one from Eduardo de Castro, but that is applicable even for the Adivasis of Chotanagpur. In such universe, all ethical values are totally humanistic. Communitarian participatory cultures of Adivasis can rescue us from the mad race of development and individualistic competitive cultural values. Inclusive gender practices add on to the above described features of Adivasi morality. And finally, to speak about the tribal, I'm trying to devise a kind of Adivasi theory on morality. Adivasis of Chotanagpur adhere to customary morality, which is not subjected to rigidity. The possibility of progress, when reflected by the community, is the hallmark of such customary morality. So members of the tribe generally exhibit qualities such as honesty, truthfulness, cooperation, non-judgmental, and profoundly caring. Their nature of loving hospitality and trust has been exploited by some non-tribals in grabbing their land and resources, which is a fact, and which is a painful fact. Their philosophy of non-interference and exclusivity generates in them a sense of respect for others' space, provided they respect theirs. They would never intrude anyone's private space or property. Summing up the various human values characteristics of Adivasis, it can be easily asserted that they do not accept utilitarian nor Kantian theory of ethics. Virtue ethics discussed by Aristotle and religious texts do not apply to Adivasi morality. Ethics of care definitely comes close to tribal ethics for its emphasis on compassion, but it does not accommodate customs within its practice. So Adivasi morality can be theorized on the basis of custom and community, where customs are guide and community is regulative. The customs are practices within the nature-human spirit continuum. The land is very holy. It is a holy ground for us. If this moral philosophy is to be named, it is a holistic theory of ethics. To level it by a specific name would reduce its magnanimity. To conclude the whole my argument, basically I would want to say again that there are a lot of weaknesses. Also, it is not about the perfection about the tribal community or tribal morality. One thing that I want to point out is the Adivasi community, with its high value of cooperation, must still learn to accommodate gender justice in their system. And of course, although Adivasi community has abandoned the traditional practice of Dhumkudia, which is a house of learning, its description by S.C. Roy concerning sexual practices does indicate some signs of inappropriate morality. Of course, another point that is there about Parha system in Jharkhand, where we do not see much of the women participation. Finally, what is significant to consider is their morality, is that in their moral world, which is rich, filled with total human values, genuine to the aspirations of any individual, who not only loves their fellow humans, but also owns responsibility towards nature and non-human world. And this morality not only brings meaning to one's existence in this life, but also makes an effort to preserve life world for the future generations to come. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you, Roshan Khalko. I now invite Dolly Murmu from Lady Irwin College, the University of Delhi.
Hello, everyone. So I would like to present my screen first. Let me present. Is it visible?
Yes,
Okay.
it's beginning. Yeah.
So my topic of presentation is the significance of Baha festival among the Santhal of Jharkhand. So this is a very typical and very important festival which generally the Santhal tribes they celebrate, and it has a very strong, deep rooted meanings which are attached to it, because only once, the moment you experience, if you happen to visit sometimes in Jharkhand, and if you happen to visit during this festive time, which is generally springtime. So it has a very important and very significant, it has a lot of very important meanings it has attached, it had adhered. People are the sense of belongingness, the social grouping you can see. And this festival is basically talks about how to celebrate with the nature. They actually worship the nature, and they are thankful to mother goddess, the mother nature, and to give this gratitude, to show this gratitude towards the mother nature. This festival is being celebrated. So baha, actually literal sense in Santhali, it means flower. So it symbolizes the blooming flower of the nearby groves, which basically includes the trees like sal, this is Soria robusta, which we call in a scientific name, the mahua tree, and all the varieties of flowering plants and the trees. And during the spring season, you will see these are all lush, bright color flower. They all are flowers everywhere. You can see the flowering plants are with the bright color flowers, and it's a very nice moment to enjoy. So the bright color flower convey the message of happiness, joy, excitement, progress, growth, and union. Among Santhal, Baha ceremony is celebrated every year during the spring season at the community level. Now, who are Santhal? Santhal are the largest tribe in Jharkhand state of India in terms of population, and also found in the states of Assam, Tripura, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Orissa, West Bengal. Santhal call themselves as a Hor Hopon, literally meaning they're the son of the man. So they regard themselves as a special people, and they have an egalitarian society. Santhal also follow the Sarna religion, that is, they worship nature. The Santhal are mainly agricultural tribes with around 95% of the population engaged in the agrarian livelihood. So moving on to the festival, how do they celebrate festival, or what is the sense of festival, that the meaning that which is attached. Santhal religious beliefs and seasonal festivals are organized to ensure safety and prosperity at the community level from their bonga, that is the spiritual god of the Santhal. Therefore, all of the festival consists of a communal worship. So it is basically this festival, and most of their festival are just generally they are celebrated at the communal level. Nobody celebrate at the individual level. All the villagers will come together to celebrate any of their festival. So Baha is one of the biggest festival of Santhal after Sohrai, which is the harvest festival. The commencement of the festival is being sensed by the people as the unification of the entire family and the villagers. The material life of Santhal is sought to be guarded by the appropriate ceremony and the rituals in the honor of the Bunga, that is the spirits. And Santhal also believe that if they fail to perform these annual rituals, and then their Bunga or their spiritual god would be displeased and might punish them with calamities. So on the other hand, they also rejoice with their spirits over the good harvesting. So whenever they have a good harvest, they enjoy with their spiritual word. They do a lot of prayers, and they are very thankful. So the significance of this festival deals with the massive proposition of the bonga, that is the benevolent spirits who are asked to keep the village free from any kind of sickness and disease, and to protect their crops and cattle from all kinds of natural calamities. Santhal also considered that the Baha festival as a feast of fertility. So you can see here, this is the Sal group. These are the plants, in the nearby Sal group, sacred group, where men and women together, they dance, they celebrate, and see, we can see some of the clips there. I have few more. This is the flowering plant which I have taken it, and this is the women, with their attire, traditional attire, and look at the brightness. Here is a place in the Sal group that they prepare a place where they worship, they invoke their deities. So Baha festival, how it is celebrated. The village priest will decide and fix a day, and formally he'll announce the celebration of the festival. It continues for the 3 days. The process of prayers begins with the animal sacrifice and offering of the fresh crops, fruits, flour, etc. In doing so, priest tries to regulate them and their relationship with the visible and invisible world around them. After the prayer is over, the villagers seek the blessings of the priest by touching the feet as a gesture known as Dobo Johar in Santhali, and in return they receive flower from the priest as a blessing. After the Baha dance begins, and the people sing the Baha song, and they move in procession from sacred group to their village. So after priests have visited every house in the village, a very interesting water splashing ceremony takes place, and it is very much close to, resemble Holi actually. So here the men and women, they splash colored water on each other, which is soaked in the sal flowers, and it is interesting to note that the relationship of joking and avoidance can be observed in the ceremony among the kin members, and Santhal observe a kind of restraint and avoidance behavior towards a specific relationship. Here you can see, the priest being washed feet. Here the women are dancing in the sacred group area. This is the dance pair where they are there inside the village area. They are dancing together. So look at the pattern, the kind of secularization you can see about the men and women, the gender. There's no gender stereotype as such. I mean, they are so fond of dancing with men and women. They put together and they dance. Santhal are highly romantic kind of a people. They're also known as Rasik Manwa, and which means one who enjoys life to the fullest. Therefore, they compose songs on the spots by looking at any objects or individuals. So they're very talented.
Dolly, sorry to interrupt. You have 2 minutes left.
Okay, so I'll move on to the conclusion. Since Baha festival is associated with the Baha dance, it brings positivity among the group members while celebrating Baha festival. It creates a sense of belongingness among the Santhal. And according to Kurat, the anthropological study on dance, he concludes that a typical dance pattern occurs on sex is the most sacred dance form, while increasing complexities and mingling of the sexes of both the gender comes with increasing secularization. And this type of dance form are found to exist among the Santhal. Both men and women find delight in singing and dancing together and are very expressive in communicating their emotions. The Baha dance reflects story of bravery about the group members who go for hunting on the third day of the Baha festival, and it also communicates a strong sense of social group bonding. So the Baha festival also reflects the concept of sustainability, where Santhal people try to plant the saplings of sal and mahua in their groups, thus maintaining a balance in the environment. The Baha festival helps to foster the member of the group to collectively defend the interest of the group and work towards the collective welfare of the entire Santhal community. So I think time has come back to let us go to our traditions, and where we can look for or take away some of the learning information about the feelings of, brotherhood, sense of belongingness, and sense of oneness. Thank you all. You can see this is a beautiful picture, dancing women. They are, with that flower, and the men beating the drums. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dolly. That was very vibrant set of slides that you presented, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We now have Durba Mandal from JNU.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, everyone. So in my paper, I aim to study the representation of tribal cultures and practices in popular Bengali thriller fiction, the domain of Rahosya Romancha and Kishore Sahitya, or young adult mystery thrillers. Basically, even in the 21st century, it remains a genre loved widely, not only by adolescents, but young adult and mature readers. So what I note in my presentation is how this popular genre often tends to appropriate certain aspects of tribal systems, such as religious practices, rituals, gods and goddesses, or folklore as plot points. So particularly in horror or suspense, mystery, adventure thrillers, we see either the indigenous individual or some romanticized tribal practice stereotyped as the exotic site of uncanny that motivates an adventure-seeking urban protagonist to confront the limitations of his rational approach towards the material world, or we see the lack of proper engagement with the tribal cultures that are depicted and made to fade into the background. Often penned by urban upper-class men, works of Bangla thriller fiction represent the tribal essence either as a site of horror and potential danger, or as manifesting exotic others, quote unquote, who live in self imposed isolation away from modern society. So, the primary agenda of my presentation is to note the deeper implications of a popular tradition of vernacular genre fiction interacting with unknown cultures and unfamiliar populations. So, Bangla young adult fiction, as I said, it has always been associated with some of the biggest names in the literary tradition, and there is always this nostalgic attachment that most of us share with this genre. So, it would not be fair to consider it a conscious attempt on part of the authors to sustain stereotypes that they can then pass on to their large reader base. But it is indeed easier to succumb to popular stereotypes in such speculative genres, whether as a reader or as a writer. So, even in the works of some of the most prominent authors of Bangla thrillers, this issue of tribal portrayal, tribal representation can become tricky. And as we reread these novellas as adults, we see it more clearly. So I will provide some examples. Like in Vibhuti Bandyopadhyay's novella Mishmider Koboch, or The Amulet of the Mishmis, detective fiction turns supernatural when the murderer blames the unexplainable evil powers of an amulet he stole from the body of a deity worshipped by the Mishmi tribe in Assam for bringing his downfall. In another story by him, titled Ronkini Devir Khorgo, the author takes us to a temple where goddess Ronkini in the Manbhum region, who was once worshipped by Adivasi tribes that lived in this area before the Hindus came. So, these Hindu rites of worship, they are clearly differentiated from the ways of the savages who would incorporate rituals like human sacrifice and ornamenting the goddess with actual human skulls. In arguably the most popular novel from Sunil Gangopadhyay's Kaka Babu series, called Shobuj Deeper Raja, or the King of the Green Islands, the adventures are centered around the Jarwa community in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Popular opinion about the Jarwas in the novel is widely negative. The word hingostro is repeatedly used to describe them. There is a sense of wild, animalistic savagery attached to this word. So the story also takes this patriotic turn when we find out that their king is actually this Bengali freedom fighter named Gunoda Talukdar, who had once broken free from, spoiler alert by the way, broken free from cellular jail, and he chose to remain in bliss amongst the savages who saved them. Though Gangopadhyay ends his story with a much more sympathetic attitude towards the tribe, but the fact does not change that the Jarwas are denied much agency. They are interpreted through this cultured upper class man, an outsider who has somehow managed to rise to this position of their monarch. Now that man becomes the mouthpiece of this tribe that worships a rock and vouches for the revocation of the tribe's quote unquote savage status. The Jarwas are then homogenized as a bunch of stereotypical features who are obedient to this enlightened patriot. I can give on many examples like Himadri Kishore Dasgupta's horror story Mosmai Orchid, where this man from Khashi community grows orchids that suck blood, and then the man hunts victims for that purpose. In Shorodindu's Bomkesh story Durgo Rahosyo, the Bede community is portrayed as this whimsical, dangerous population associated with poison and snake venom. The murderer even manages to get his hands on the poison that he uses for the murders from these quote unquote, dangerous people. Most of Himadri Kishore Dasgupta's popular adventure thriller novels like Shunda Dipir Bhayankar or Burundir Shobuj Manush, these are set in obscure locations in Africa or Indonesia, where exotic communities like the primitive pygmies or islanders of Sunda protect some exotic artifact or some endangered creature. So, what happens when we go beyond geographical limitations and we incorporate tribes that would otherwise be considered global in the plot development of a vernacular genre? The risk of appropriation might get diluted, but at the cost of a much wider homogenization. The concept of civility also might get very relative when considering ethnicities that go beyond national boundaries. But the fact remains that the idea of aboriginal presence continues to be exoticized and otherized. Basically, what is being done is that these people, they are clearly detached from the world where the readers come from. So the other approach is that complete distancing of tribal populations, because readers do not come across many authors in the popular genre who come directly from aboriginal backgrounds. Bangla literature clearly lacks representation when it comes to authors from diverse communities, and it can be problematic if an upper class writer chooses to impersonate a tribal protagonist. So, such distancing, such as that we see in works of, let's say, Manobendra Pal or Shoshtipada Chattopadhyay, the risk that it takes is that it can get sometimes very racist and very stereotyped. So, as Bangla thriller fiction evolves, the contemporary developments in the genre sees tantra and folklores becoming more and more popular and getting incorporated in the rubric of horror, There is this element of secrecy. So different kind of tribal populations and their clandestine ways of life become the site of study. In many stories of lower Tantra, the Buddhist tribes like Nyingma sect, for example, they appear as practitioners of dark arts. So now I'll get to my point. This kind of otherization through popular fiction, it goes on to serve a few purposes. In such romanticized stories, the idea of dispossession is ignored. For example, in Bandopadhyay's novella, the murderer, even while blaming the amulet to justify his wrongdoings, he never considers his act of stealing a community artifact to be immoral. Such othering of unfamiliar communities based on their remote living conditions and their quote unquote savage practices like human sacrifices, unfamiliar eating habits, it establishes a binary between a world of modern science and another of ancient superstitions. The onus is then put on the tribal people who chose to embrace a backward lifestyle, and the fact is ignored that probably these communities, they never got to choose what land they live on. Thirdly, the tribal population is homogenized. There is hardly ever a protagonist who comes from an Adivasi background. The hero or speaker is always an intruder. He might be assisted by a tribal representative, but the inherent hierarchy in their roles is clearly established. Any kind of resistance is romanticized in an attempt to overlook potent inherent identity politics. The gender issue is also never materialized. So it is interesting how among the many words for tribe in Bangla, probably the most well-known word is upojati, which literally translates to sub-community. Upo as in sub, jati would be community. So this word has this built-in sense of an inferiority that properly captures the active opinion about tribal experiences that the Bengali community at large finds engraved in what Gramsci would call the bourgeois common sense. To play it safe and keep up the image of a progressive, educated, liberal society, deeper politics, deeper issues like those of caste and class are always brushed under the carpet. The utopian idea of equal access for all is promoted, but then the power structures can never really be hidden. There are everyday pronouns that even help, like they and us. There are pronouns like tui, tumi, and apni. The element
Sorry to interrupt you, Durba. You have about 2 to 3 minutes left.
All right, ma'am, I'll wrap up. So they are otherized through these very everyday pronouns, which carry a connotation of respect and hierarchy within them. A close study of the dialects and the conversational styles in these stories, they disclose how permanent power structures are infused in the most basic rhetorics of language. Otherness is commodified and maintained. Bell Hooks talks about how the differences that the other, quote unquote, other presents become the site of pleasure in commodity culture, as they can be more satisfying than the usual mundane ways of everyday life that we're used to. The manufacturers and consumers in the genre of popular fiction who like to venture outside their comfort zones through such portrayals of a different world risk trading very closely towards fetishization and appropriation. So, in adjacent genres like thriller, suspense, detective fiction, mystery, horror, basically the popular young adult fiction, the other, quote unquote, is an important existence because most of these genres either tread very closely or completely with the speculation and fantasy. The other becomes this one who falls outside our familiar systems and the side that thus produces a sense of wrong that needs to be corrected. The figure of the other does things that are not to be emulated or they're not to be followed. I keep coming back to my primary point that either by directly showing tribal characters as sites of horror or by maintaining a safe, politically correct distance from them, what is assured through popular fiction is that a particular sect is positioned outside the domain of culture and modernity, even when the tribal presence is revered by being equated with nature and glorified for their pristine ways of life, as done in Shobuj Deeper Raja, let's say. The truth is that major biological and economic issues are glossed over. The Jarwas are never considered Indians as such. These uncultured tribals killing intruders, it is seen as a mere act of wanting to be left alone in their land of choice. The idea is not considered that maybe because of a lack of connection with the outside world, they do not have the basic bodily immunity to certain basic diseases that an outsider might bring in, and many such. At the end, what even Talukdar is not allowed to remain as a part of them. He has to be brought into our civilization. He has to be brought back. So, by pretending that the tribal individuals intentionally obstruct their amalgamation into the mainstream, a neoliberal community suffering from a deep colonial hangover, like the bourgeois Bengali society, can keep up a facade of a distant inclusivity and egalitarianism. These depictions hardly take into account any contemporary dilemmas that indigenous communities encounter. These portrayals are indeed very much in tandem with primitive colonial concepts regarding the other. As Edward Said had said in Orientalism, that during the era of colonial occupation, the West had homogenized the Orient through certain stereotypes and romantic ideas. The process of such psychological otherization had helped them convince themselves that they are superior and the inferior other, as a site of exaggerated differences, has to be conquered. conquered. Even though it has been a long time since the British have left our country, certain innate colonial after effects, which are at large boosted by the ever present Brahmanical dilemmas of the Indian societal hegemony, are ever present in the society we inhabit today. Since we are expected to repress the manifestations of our inner conservatism and colonial hangover, the silly popular genres for children, they can become harmless outbursts of certain internal sets of beliefs. So perhaps that is why I believe through the study of portrayals of unfamiliar tribal cultures in popular young adult fiction, we come to understand that Bengali society is still not completely out of its deep-rooted colonial hangover. Anyway, I'll end it with what Tabish Khair talks about in his column for the Hindu. He says that it would not be fair to blame it all on colonial inheritance and neo-colonial cultural ramifications because I'm quoting him, before the British brought us stories of African cannibalism, we had our own stories of cannibalism associated with classical texts down to some Chitra comics with dark-skinned non-Aryan looking creatures. So as long as we don't tackle our inherent racism and casteism, there is no way for us to do justice to fictional portrayals of otherized cultures and otherized lives. So this is one issue that goes beyond authorial intent and reader's preference. So unlearning and overcoming that micro processes that have internalized these prejudices and stereotypes, it can be difficult and time consuming, yet they're achievable, I believe. So I would end with uh, trying to looking into a way of coming out of the problems of such fictional representations. So do we? Yes,
Durga, I
ma'am.
would request you to please wrap up.
Yes, ma'am, I'm wrapping up. This is my last question. So, do we completely stop setting these stories in cultures that we don't know about? Would that be a too much? Would that be too much? So, I would end with this question that let us all think about it. How can we completely come out of the problems of such portrayals? Maybe we can do proper research or something. So, yeah, let's just not leave it to this young genre, silly genres which should not be studied, and let's maybe delve a bit deeper into it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Durba. I now call upon Miss Asha from Department of English, Andaman and Nicobar University, Nicobar Island. Pondicherry University, I presume.
Uh, Good evening. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
First of all, I would like to thank the organizing team to giving me this opportunity to present my paper. Now, I would like to share my screen. Uh, is it visible? Hello?
It is visible, but it's not visible in the. Are you presenting from your phone,
Yes,
Asha?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I'm presenting it on
Okay,
my
okay,
phone.
okay, okay.
Is it now visible, ma'am?
Partially visible. The edges are getting cut off.
It's better to rotate your screen, then it's more
Okay,
visible.
okay, okay.
Asha, go to portrait. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Portrait.
Yes.
Go to portrait, click it, auto rotate. Now you can do that.
Okay.
Hmm.
Is it now visible, ma'am?
Yes,
Yes, now
yes.
fine.
Okay, so coming to the title, my paper title, that is to hate. Tihet is actually a Nicobarish word. I don't know who termed this word, but I do know the meaning of it, which it is like that a group of family living together. So I entitled my paper as a Tihet because here I want to talk about the livelihood of our community in early days and also about our tradition which is still exists in our community. Next, I would like to say that in our community, the harmonies which it is still exists in our home. For many years, like it is believed that our ancestors used to live together in group, but due to the growth in population, they split in region, which we now call the village or the panam. So here, what the chief did, he just distributed equally uh, amount of food to each and every leader in order to make their own region. And this particular place is referring to this term to hate. So, okay, each village have their own captains, and in this village there is a small family living together, which we call Tuhit, and it is led by a elder one, which is the wise man or a woman. Now they are the one uh, who take decision on all matter, right from big to small, and all the members of the family should have to obey them. The members should work according to the decision. So at present, there are total 15 villages in Kanakuba Island. Now coming to the history of Kanakuba Island, which is also known as Poo in our Nicobarese language, is the northernmost of the Nicobar Island. It is also one of the three local administrative division of the Indian district of Nicobar, parts of the Indian Union Territory of Andaman Nicobaran. The Kanakuba Island is a place of enchanting beauty with a historic past, as we could surpass the remnant of Japanese attack in the form of tankers and bunkers. The island serves as administrative headquarters for Nicobar Group. The Kanakuba is laid quite disassociated from the other islands of the group. It is commonly referred as the Coral Island or Coconut Island. It is fringed by the coconut tree. Before Britishers took possession over the island, it was under the European occupation. Since then, the custom of having a village chief or captain is maintained. So in early days, our community setup was like surrounded from all sides of by small huts with a community center known as the Alpanam. So this is a particular place for feast, and actually for it is a place for gathering where they used to do a general meeting in the center. Now coming to the next topic, that is to hate in the past. I don't. To hate is define a group of people generally live under one roof. In old days, our ancestors used to have a common kitchen, and the kitchen used to be decorated with the skull of big because, according to them, it signifies great wealth and also to protect the house from evil. A cooking house were called the Talika, and in this cooking house there was called the Sandraga, a house which is built on stilts for couples and small children. So at the time, there were also like common ownership of land, which consequently the locality, inhabitant, and houses, which is now known as the same Tuhet. And in each Tuhet had a Mapati, which I already told you before that they used to live in a large beehive house, and it was occupied by the Tuhet head and other members. Now, next point is like birth and death were considered unclean. And for this, our Ma Tuhet or Ma Panam, the head of our village, they gave order to each Tuhet to build a different houses for these processes. So, birth house called Pati Yangya and the death house called Pati Kupa. In Pati Yangya, that is the birth house, was used for the birth, and the expectant couple would move to the birth house to closer to the date of the delivery along with the senior member of the family. The birth took place in this house, and it was forbidden for both the mother and the child, to leave the house till about 21 days of the delivery. So only after the restricted day the mother and the child could rejoin the Tuhet. And yes, previously there were no captains in our community. The very term this captain, but only Matuhet were there, the head of the family. This concept, it actually came, the concept of captain or vice captain, it came after the invasion of the Portuguese traders for their own purpose, and it was carried out by Danes, Austrian, and as well as the Britishers. The word captain came from the trading ship where the head of the ship were known as captain. A captain in a village is selected from among the people. They may be a head of the Tuhet, Ma Tuhet, or just a member in the family, on the basis of the qualities like communication, skill, good behavior, and knowledge about our traditional norms, wisdom, ability to make decisions, and compassion for the welfare of the community, they are selected. The house at the time in previous one was like structured in a way to suit the climate of the Nicobar Island. The traditional house hut constructed on stilt, these huts were adapted to the ecology of the island. The Nicobar Islands have equatorial climate. For this reason, the roof protected from these elements of nature, and the wooden frame of the hut provided stability during earthquake. Now we will see to it in the present days, in today's days.
Asha, I'm sorry to interrupt. You have about 3 minutes left. Please go ahead.
Okay, ma'am. Uh, in the present day, most of the area we have like owing to the state of modern education, many of us have found employment in the government sector, like mostly as a teachers, doctors, and ministerial staff. And we can see in our college also, it is headed by Nicobarese woman, maybe Dr. Jojibeth Wilson. And she is the one who completed the first woman Nicobarese who completed her PhD in English. So in this new era, the great pastime is feasting. Football is the most popular game, and we have won several Subrata Mukherjee Cup also in junior national level 4 times. Canoe racing, volleyball, wrestling, and other popular games in sport. Some of the Nicobari sport personnel have excelled in national and international event in cycling, namely Deborah Harrell, Issa Alban. These are the famous personality in sport. Now, I would like to come to the conclusion that the hate system is good because the work carried out is in a systematical way, and it is the backbone of the Nicobarese community. If this system was not made by one ancestor, our community would have collapsed because this binds us together and makes us stronger. But you see, our culture and tradition are now in the verge of extinction. Due to the great modernization, the new generation are more attracted by the lifestyle of the Western society. With this, I would like to end my paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. And now, Vinay Brandon. He's pursuing his PhD at the Department of Sociology, Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi, and he's our last speaker for the day.
Good evening, everyone. Many thanks to the organizers for providing me this opportunity. We have a lot on our hands, so I'm just going to quickly share my presentation with you so that we can begin. Mine is a very nomothetic kind of paper in contrast to all the thick descriptions we've seen through the day. So can you see my screen, and is it on full screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. So let me begin without further ado. So as you can see, the title of my paper is Banking on the Tribe.
You could, sorry to interrupt, you could put it on the slideshow mode. Right now we can see your desktop.
Sure. Yes, good to go. Right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Babu. So yes, so the title of my paper is Banking on the Tribe. And basically in this paper, I'm going to pursue 3 counterintuitive claims. Number 1, tribal money is not simple. Also, I will be interchangeably using tribal and indigenous money. So just to flag that. Number 2, in fact, tribal money at its heart shares a cognitive unity in terms of the same kind of social abstraction or a primordial element of social abstraction as compared to modern money. And number 3, that studying the tribal economy, whether through debt and reciprocal relations or through primitive exchange, can yield fresh insights to understanding A, the history of community currencies through the modern period, and B, the contemporary revolution in digital payments and digital money. Okay, so I'm taking exception to the patronizing high modernist view of the tribal economy, especially with relation to this idea that modern money is more abstract. Tribal money required a commodity form or a particular object relation. I'm going to make a claim that, firstly, to define virtual money. By virtual money, I mean a chain of deferred promises that circulate within a community of transactors who agree to share such a promise as value. Now, historically speaking, in terms of the ethnohistory and the anthropological work that I'm drawing from, how did this happen? So it happened through reciprocal relationships, through social debt, in other words. But the important thing about such promises is that they had to be quantifiable. And then they had to be transferable as social payments. And we'll see how that happened. To quote Jeffrey Ingham, the social theorist of money then, the very idea of money, which is to say of abstract accounting of value, is both logically anterior and historically prior to market exchange. So there has been a well-established historical evidence in Jeffrey Ingham's The Nature of Money, as well as David Graeber's Debt, that a means of calculating obligations and debts came first, and it came in pre-market tribal and clan society. And then later on, this system got indexed into the larger world historical shifts in both power systems as well as the pursuit of empire, as well as changes in mode of production. Okay, so to sum up quickly this slide, I just aim to sketch through this archive that you can see on your screen, a provocative and compelling counterview which privileges the ingenuity of tribal monies while offering a portrayal of the savage mind as capable of far-sighted social assessment of worth. By savage, in this context, I mean energetic, just like Levi-Strauss did. And it's also well documented through biological and physical anthropology that the social assessment of worth, in terms of both object relationships and social abstraction and social calculation, kind of happens across time, and it's not something based in the modern period. These other concepts I will cover in subsequent slides. But just to flag the last important distinction here, it's that we cannot, just to sum up point number 2 in a simplified way, that money is actually both a system of credit and commodity. And this false dichotomy is kind of getting in our way in terms of thinking of it in a more intricate form, and where indigenous money can particularly serve a certain function in terms of enlightening us in terms of how money is thought about across space and time. So yeah, money is both a system of credit and commodity. It can act as one or the other or both, and the cultural context in which it is placed, in which this social calculus is based, produces different performances and practices, a la primitive monies. And this also kind of presages the modern day digital explosion in social payments, a provocative claim which I'll get on to shortly. Just to cover the myths, the origin myths of modern money then, this comes straight from David Graeber's brilliant work on the social history of debt. And the point is that we've pieced this history backwards. It's not like barter emerged first, which is like the standard economist's explanation about the prehistoric origins of modern credit money. And it's not like the advancement in abstraction is a function of modernity or our evolutionary kind of heritage, whether unilineal or otherwise. You have to have the capacity to think abstractly in terms of what is owed as a rough credit system, in terms of a spot trade. And this entire problem that how many chickens should be traded for a cow is basically bunkum. And this has a solid historical evidence behind it. Also, there's more evidence in even how a pre-capitalist market perform quantitative commodity exchange coming from Gregory's Savage Money. And he points out that there's an element of relational abstraction in terms of how social relations are valued in terms of being able to do this. So primitive money then serves more functions than merely circulating prestige, maintaining status boundaries, or enacting a multi-stage ritual, which are performative dimensions. But we have to look at them as of immense cultural value, a shared cognitive system where you keep tabs of who owes what, of how debts are recirculated and what kind of claims of ownerships can be made. That is of immense cultural value, and that is the source of local creativity of indigenous money. Okay, to sum up this argument, just look at point number 2. Don't go by the big words. Basically, David Graeber compels us to think that the history of debt versus commodity money has been cyclical across long periods of epochs of world historical shifts. So whilst you can see early documentation of detailed pricing systems in Welsh and Northern Irish villages, in Polynesian societies and so on, these get indexed to then war finance, which is the birth of taxation, and how to extract land rents and become contextualized into accounting systems of the early agrarian command economies in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Later on, the Axial Age, commodity money.
Sorry to come in, Vinay. You have 3 minutes to wrap up.
Bullion appears. Yes, I'll get on with it. Yes. So this cyclical history is one of violence, of erasure, of disjuncture and rupture. And basically what is at stake here is that warring groups and restless nations are attempting to fuse the social calculus of debt with the dominant interests of power. Also in the modern period, you get this false political consensus that there's taxation is transcendent social trust. So now we can think of money creation as a de jure sovereign monopoly, settled in relational terms as a general equivalent, means of exchange, store of value, unit of account, your classic story from economics. Okay, so I pointed this out to you. That how do we dovetail ethnography with the political economy critique, basing it in global comparative history? That is the methodological challenge which I take up in this paper. And these are some of the concepts which are important for me to discuss with you before I summarize my presentation. So wealth in people is a really important concept. Jane Geyer's used it, Sibel Kasamba's used it more recently. It's a concept with a long historical lineage from Pan-African studies. And basically it means that everyone in an extended community can use the community wealth as a source of embodied value, that you locate wealth in people, not in money forms, and that there's a mutual recognition of independence and a shared ownership. And this is mostly happens through African tribes in terms of how community rights are legislated in both state and stateless societies. So I impel you to look at this concept in detail. Also, it is really important in terms of what is of interest to me in terms of ultra-modern digital money, which is alternative and virtual currencies. Now, these always entangle with politics of labor, value, and worth. And there is a primordial debt logic through which you can look at all of this digital innovation. And I will impel you to do this now. So consider the case of the stone money called Rai. This is a stone money used in Yapese society, an island in Micronesia. Now, this technology, this ancient stone money, has been compared as the precursor to modern Bitcoin. And it's basically through maintaining an oral ledger in terms of performative rituals and dance festivals, becoming the site of attesting value to someone who's been able to quarry this heavy stone and bring it all the way back to Yapese Island, to the island from another Polynesian island. And it has a fascinating history. We can look at it in the discussion. But the critical point about modern monies like cryptocurrencies, the critical difference is that they aim to digitally deterritorialize value. And the way in which this happens through a shared network of miners and coders who are sharing both their skills as well as electrical resources to verify these transactions is what is a homologue with how oral ledgers work in Yapese society in terms of these stone slabs called Rai. Again, this entire move, this entire discursive shift can be studied very interestingly through this idea of wealth in people, that you trust the community to perform an imagined community in this case, but they'll perform their tasks in terms of verifying these transactions, but also they share and are mutually vested in a future world where the values of privacy, of anonymity, and of what constitutes value counts together. So you can think of crypto miners as digital nomads, or well, to use our term, calculative savages. All right, so this is my final slide. Basically, a lot of new research is happening at the intersection of behavioral economics and anthropology, also user interface design. And the key point is this, that with the digital mapping over our extant social fabrics, how do we then look at these new monies, these digital currencies, and which are really social payments mechanism? And can they be used to stimulate financial savings in a largely unbanked world? The case of M-Pesa in Kenya is of particular value here, and Sibel Kasimba's work looks at that in detail in terms of the networks of both mobile money as well as the kinship networks and heartholds of digital finance. And I will now leave you with the final question, which is my request for you to think this before you use a Paytm or a pay later wallet the next time. What are we performing in the name of value when we use a mobile wallet or a pay later feature or transfer money through a corporate payment interface, which has its own predatory abstraction underlying all the design? So are we all primitive sophisticates in the current digital payment scenario? Sophisticate is basically a word which comes from behavioral economics. It means that we'll be aware of our biases as we are now, as in the future. So I'll stop here. This was a lot for you to digest.
Thank you, Vinay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Professor Mohanty. Vinay, would you stop presenting, please? Yeah, thank you. May I request you to take over, and any questions?
So now we can invite questions.
Yes, sir.
Then, if you have specific questions, please raise it. Be very brief and specific.
There aren't any questions, but there has been some discussion going on in the chat, but no questions in particular. Anybody has any questions to ask, please feel free. Sir, can I ask a question?
Please.
Vinay, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, in fact, I want you to tell everybody here, because a lot of things we are presuming when we are talking about Paytm and we pay you later and Google Money or whatever. So what is the one value that underlies all this? I presume it's a value of trust. Is that so?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the $1 million question. That's the question they don't want us to think in a sense. But yes, I think the underlying values here is money is becoming, or payments rather. It's the first time where you're having social payments become a part of new media or a social media even. And it's how a community of transactors can form through something which is as arbitrary or external as a QR code. It's about how value is being performed in everyday life when someone uses this technology. And the case of M-Pesa in terms of the Maasai women in Kenya is really important to look at here, because they organized a lot of their household finance when this kind of technology came to the fore. And I suppose I'm not someone who's very future hopeful about it kind of trickling all the way down and creating financial inclusion, because there is a corporate element to these infrastructures. But definitely there are ways for us to think about money in new terms, in terms of a community of people who kind of use these easy transferable payments and log what we think of as value, sharing with each other seamlessly.
Thank you. Professor Mohanty, would you like to comment?
Yeah, if there are no other questions, then I will.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is there any other question? Please.
No.
Okay.
There are only some. Yeah.
Okay, no questions are there. Huh?
No.
Okay. Thank you for the wonderful presentations. I really, all these paper presenters, they have made a kind of very interesting points covering the beliefs and practices of the tribals, and having which has content, economic content, cultural contents, and particularly the last paper which was presented relating to economic anthropology. It's quite interesting, and it's a traditional kind of it's a conventional view. We always, when we think of the tribals, we think it is a kind of an isolated community, and in fact they are not isolated community. There is a kind of constant interaction between tribals and non-tribals in the sphere of cultural domain, economic sphere, political spheres, and continuous interaction and exchange is going on. Some of these tribal practices and beliefs and practices that has also become a tradition of that has become a kind of great tradition, part of the elements of great tradition, and some of the practices and beliefs of the mainstream society is also found among the tribals. The kind of binary division that morality, rationality, tradition, modernity, or individual collectivity, they are to be viewed in the context of this change, in this context of this transition. And in fact, actually, we have very good, interesting kind of presentations, starting from the moral philosophy of the tribal moral philosophy of tribes of Chhatnagpur. That is a kind of very interesting presentation. I was expecting something more, that what is the specificities of Chhatnagpur tribes. That was actually somehow it is not presented in the paper, and it would have added actually more meaning to the paper. That I think the paper presenter can take into account. And that question of morality and rationality, why do you think that is a kind of moral ethics? And do you think that the elements of rationality is absent there, or the kind of interaction between tradition and modernity, they have to be more actually contextualized and more to be elaborated? It is I understand that you have some kind of points in mind, and you have some points, but they need to be connected with the kind of wider debate on tradition versus modernity and morality and rationality or individual and collectivity. And the second paper, actually Dolly Murmu's paper, that is on significance of Baha festival among the Santhals of Jharkhand. That is actually it's a kind of good presentation, and it tries to say that it gives a kind of a picture that there is some this festival or this Baha festival, it has some kind of contribution towards the social and cultural and economic kind of activities. The point is that what is the actually manifest content and what are the latent contents that need to be specified. It will be actually, I know that you may be knowing all these things with the empirical illustrations. If you can bring in these points, it will be more kind of helpful and more meaningful. And I know that it is difficult within 5 minutes time to present. I am chairing the session. I should not bring out these kind of points, but I enjoyed the paper. But having listened to you, so I don't want to keep quiet. I also want to make some kind of points which I feel you may consider it. Then Durba Mandal's paper on human sacrifice and semi-divine deities and the rituals among the tribal and exploring the representation of tribal cultures in popular Bengali thriller. She has actually brought out a kind of literary narratives and in a sense of literary debates in the tribal culture, and also she presented a kind of very critical account of this debate, questioning the conception of homogeneity and gender issues, identity, and this is a kind of really very useful and very kind of meaningful thing. When you are looking at this portrayal, sometimes also we question whether we have to see these novels or these narratives in the context of the current changes, which ongoing changes which are going in the tribal society, for which we do not have a kind of an authentic account to view. And when we go by those narratives, we have a kind of different stereotypical kind of understanding of the tribal communities. But anyway, so we need to connect these narratives with the modern writings or modern kind of if the writings are not available, with the modern kind of studies, the recent studies which are available. It's not that only the kind of views which we get from the novels or thrillers, that we can connect it to the empirical studies which are available. So that will be more meaningful and more kind of insightful. Then the fourth paper, that is on duet system among the Nicobar communities, that actually it gives a kind of descriptive account of the diverse cultural practices of these Nicobar communities, and it tries to show how it is a kind of source of integration and source of continuity of this community. But we need to be actually of the more critical kind of the kind of description which is available, and try to see in the wider context of their interaction with the larger society. Not that because of this how we have to present a kind of balanced picture of this fluid system and how it has undergone change, and how the source the kind of the sources of continuity or integration it is being maintained by this interaction also. It's not that because of their isolation or their confinement they are maintaining this kind of they are getting the source of strength from this fluid system alone. It has to be viewed in the context, the wider context. The last presentation, which was very interesting, and I must tell that we have to have a kind of some empirical illustrations from India also to substantiate these arguments. And you must be familiar with Polanyi's work on money trade and exchange, which is very interesting. And you need to actually view your argument, put your arguments in the context of his work, where a kind of very detailed account of the trade and empires, trade and money in the early empires. So that actually, that book you must have seen. If you read it and refine your arguments, that will be very good. And I actually enjoyed all these presentations. I don't know how the time passed so quickly. So I thought of actually listening to you for a kind of longer period. Thank you so much. And I look forward to see some of these papers in print. Let us hope we will have some papers in print. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. And I thank Dr. Bharadwaj and Dr. Anjita Narendran for their actually kind invitation. I thank all the presenters, all the participants for their present hearing. Thank you so much.
May I request everybody to please switch on your cameras for a quick shot. Is it taken? Have you taken a shot, tech team?
Just a minute. Yes, we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Mohanty, for sparing your valuable time, giving your essential feedback to the paper presenters, and I'm sure they will benefit immensely from your insightful comments. And thank you each one of the participants for making this session so lively. We look forward to seeing your papers in print. We are also going to take out volume. Let's hope you can complete your work and share it with us. Thank you very much. And we wind up day one. And we thank all the participants of the day and the chairs. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
God bless
Thank
you
you so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
So before winding, I think the attendance link, we have to share the attendance link. So
हाँ वो हो गया था दीपक.
I shared it.
We've shared it. You've shared it.